welcome. And thank you everyone for joining me today as well. I'll just share my screen. The presentation I have. Okay, so yes, as Ellie and Michael said, my name's Becky, and I'm really delighted to be here with you today for today's Share and Learn session about nutrition and caring. And as Michael said, that is to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the Carers UK and Nutricia partnership. And I really hope this session will be able to provide you with some useful reminders about nutrition, your diet as a carer, to stay healthy and manage your caring role, and also some general advice on nutrition during illness as well. And just to give you a bit of an idea of what we have coming up. So firstly, we'll be talking about good nutrition, and we'll discuss what that means and explore the Eat Well Guide tool. And then we'll also be spending a bit of time sharing top tips on how to make our food budget stretch without compromising on nutrition. And then looking at nutrition throughout life, we'll talk about how nutrition changes throughout our lives, looking specifically at the role of nutrition in illness, how to identify and manage nutrition for the person or people that you care for. And then again, I hope we can share some tips again for supporting food intakes for the people that you care for. And then last, but of course not least, we'll be looking at how to take care of yourself as carers, and how you can make sure that you're really looking after yourselves first and foremost. That's so important. And then at the end, hopefully we should have some time for Q&As. So yeah, please save any specific questions to the end, or I think you can put it in the chat, and then they should be asked at the end. And also just to note, I hope we can make this as interactive as possible, so we can all chat and share ideas. So like Ellie says, you can leave your camera on if you're comfortable doing so, and then unmute if you'd like to interact, or just put it in the comments if you'd like to chat or add any ideas. Okay. So before we get started, I just wanted to introduce myself properly. So this is me. I'm Becky, as you might have just heard. I'm from up north in Leeds originally, but currently I live in London. I'm a registered nutritionist with the Association for Nutrition. I have worked at Danone for about 8 years, doing various jobs, all based around nutrition, mainly in paediatrics and nutrition for children. And I was really happy to be asked to speak today with you all, as I know you're all carers for family or loved ones who are older, disabled, or seriously ill. And so I always just wanted to briefly share one of my own stories with you too. So towards the end of my late granddad's life a few years ago, my mum essentially became his full-time carer, while my grandma or his wife was also recovering from a breast cancer operation. So I've had a lens where I've been able to see a caring experience through my family, and that showed me how wonderful caring can be, but also how much it can really stretch you just by the amount of things you have to juggle, like with work and family life and self-care, and then this past year through a pandemic as well. So yes, I'm in awe of you and what you do, and I really hope that this session can give you even just a little bit of advice around nutrition as a carer. So we're going to start with what is good nutrition? What does that mean? So firstly, I'm just going to introduce the Eat Well Guide, which is what you see on screen, and we'll talk through this step by step. So obviously your diet as a carer is really important, because by eating a healthy, balanced diet overall, you can make sure you're doing your best to provide your body with the best nutrients that it needs to stay healthy and be able to manage your caring role. And because you provide extra support for others, it might mean that you could find it harder to find time to look after your own diet. So the picture here showing the Eat Well Guide hopefully is a tool that will show you the basis of how to manage a healthy, balanced diet. So for a bit of background around this, so it was developed by Public Health England, so essentially our government, and it represents a healthy, balanced diet which is ideal for most people. and it shows how much of what we eat overall should come from these 5 food groups, which are shown here. And that's in order to achieve a healthy, balanced diet. And we'll be discussing each section in more depth in a few minutes. And also, I should mention, if any of you have children or look after young children, this guide is only intended for children who are 2 years old and above. And then between 2 to 5 years old, children should gradually move towards eating within this pattern and eating the same foods as the adults around them. And also, just to mention as well, anyone with special dietary requirements or medical needs might want to check with a registered dietitian on how to adapt this Eat Well guide to meet their individual needs as well. But focusing on you as carers, first and foremost, a really important thing to remember is that every plate or every meal that you make doesn't have to look exactly like this or follow this exact criteria. It's just a really good guide to follow, try and get your balance right over the span of a week or a day or even a month as a guide. Okay, so I'm going to start with a fruits and vegetables question. And I just wanted to ask a question. What percentage of the UK population do you think currently meets the 5-a-day recommendation for eating fruit and vegetables? So I have a few multiple choice answers for you. So this could be 30%, 40%, or 60%. If you could put in the comments maybe, or you can unmute to say what you think it could be.
This is Ellie. I see that Michael just typed 40, Shirley typed A, Sheena typed A, Rosie typed 30, Gloria typed C, Anne typed B.
Okay.
Tony typed A.
Okay, thank you for your answers. So I'm going to unveil the answer now.
Denise replied A.
Okay, so it was in fact A, which is 30%. So there was a lot of right answers in there, but unfortunately this is still fairly low, so it's really important to try and boost this where we can. And out of interest, where does everyone think they sit? Does anyone think they meet it? You can put yes or no in the comments. We could discuss that later. I'll go on to the next slide. So as we've just shown or demonstrated, in general, as a population, unfortunately, we don't eat enough fruit and vegetables. So most of us should be aiming to incorporate more fruits and vegetables into our diet, with at least 5 portions a day of a variety of fruit and vegetables. And we need to do this as fruits and vegetables are a great source of vitamins and minerals and fiber, amongst lots of other health benefits as well. And we should aim for them to make up about a third of the food we eat. And also in this picture, you can see so much colour. So we've got the aubergines, purple, red tomato. So it's really good to say you can eat the rainbow, eat as many different colours of fruits and veggies as you can, as they all have varied and lots of different health benefits. So as we were just talking about 5 a day, I wanted to discuss what counts towards 5 a day and how we can take steps to increase this as well. So a portion tends to be around 80 grams of fruits or vegetables. So fresh fruit and veg like a banana or a raw salad, of course, count towards your 5 a day. But I also wanted to just give you a few more examples of easy ways that you could up your portions. So firstly, we have frozen fruit and vegetables. So things like frozen peas, frozen soybeans, frozen berries absolutely count towards your 5 a day and are just as nutritious as the fresh versions. Things like peas could be added to curries or stirred through rice or just steamed or boiled on the side of your meal. And frozen berries, I've got so much in my freezer at the moment, are really useful for adding to yogurts or cereals or even blended in a smoothie. So yeah, don't let these have a bad name. Frozen fruit and vegetables are just as nutritious. And secondly, we have tinned fruit and vegetables. So things like tinned pineapple is great, tinned green beans for vegetables. But the advice for tinned food is to try, if they're fruit, to get them in their natural fruit juice and not in syrup. And if you've got vegetables, to have them in spring water and not in brine or with added salt in there. And also fruit and veg cooked in dishes absolutely counts towards your 5 a day. Again, just because it's chopped up doesn't mean it's any less valid. So yeah, you can throw as much fruit and veg into your cooked dishes. Dried fruits also counts, anything like dried apricots, raisins, or prunes, with the only caveat that it should be tried to eat them at meal times, and not as a snack, just to reduce the impact it has on your teeth as they're so sticky. Next, we have fruit and veg in a ready meal. So any fruit and vegetables in shop bought foods, such as ready meals, they absolutely count again, but sometimes they can be high in sugar or salt or saturated fat, so that's something to be aware of as well. And if they are, just to try and have them in occasionally or in small amounts. And then lastly, I get asked this one quite a lot, so fruit juice also counts. So things like orange juice definitely counts. But the portion that's recommended is 150 millilitres, which is actually quite a small amount. And it only counts once. You can only have it as one of your 5 a day. So you can't span 5 drinks of orange juice over the day. You can only count once. And what you see I might not have mentioned is potatoes, as unfortunately don't count towards your 5 a day, but we'll be going on to that next. So the next section we have is potatoes, bread, rice, pasta, and other starchy carbohydrates. So starchy foods are a really good source of energy and the main source of a range of nutrients in our diet, like B vitamins and fiber. And B vitamins specifically are important for lots of functions in the body, and they help essentially for the body they help the body convert your food into energy. They also help to create new blood cells, maintain healthy skin cells, brain cells, and other body tissues, so they're super important. And fiber as well is just as important, as there's lots of strong evidence that eating plenty of fiber, both from fruit and veg and these starchy carbohydrates as well, is associated with many health benefits. So lower risk of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and bowel cancer. And it can also help us feel fuller. And a diet rich in fiber can also help digestion and prevent constipation. So really, really great. It's really, really great to have much more fiber in our diets. And again, you can see this section of the guide takes up about a third of the chart. So it should make up just over a third of our diet. So as you can see in the picture, it's things like potatoes, bread, cereals, porridge, rice, pasta, everything like that. But again, the guidance around here is within this circle to try and choose higher fiber whole grain varieties where possible. So things like whole wheat pasta and brown rice, or you can do little things like leaving the skin on your potatoes for an extra fiber boost. And there are also higher fiber versions of white bread and cereals. And so it's a really good idea to look out for either source of fiber or high in fiber or rich in fiber on foods that you might buy, as that gives you a really good idea of the fiber content in there. And that's not to say that white bread or white rice can't be eaten. This is just a little nudge to choose higher fiber options where you can or where possible. And the next section is looking at beans, pulses, fish, eggs, meat, and other proteins. So as you can see in here, is things like lentils, beans, fish, eggs, and I've got it there, and nuts as well. And so these are all really good sources of protein, vitamins, and minerals. And pulses, so these are things like beans, chickpeas, and lentils are really good alternatives to meat because they're lower in saturated fat and higher in fiber and protein. And if you eat meat where you can, the guide recommends to choose lean cuts of meat and lean mince, to eat less red and processed meat like bacon and ham and sausages as well. And the guide also recommends to aim for at least 2 portions of fish every week, one of which should be oily, and that's so we can get our omega-3s. And there's also, I also get asked quite a lot of questions around what is oily fish and what isn't. I wanted to check our knowledge of this as well. Ellie, feel free to shout out what people have in the comments. But first, I just wanted to ask for salmon. Do people think that's an oily fish? You can just type yes or no, and I might go through very slowly.
I have a no, yes. Gloria says yes to. Rosie, yes. So more yeses than nos for now.
Great. So yeah, it seems like the majority is correct. So it very much is classed as an oily fish. I'll go on to the next one. So tuna, whether this is fresh or tinned, what does everyone think? Yes or no to being an oily fish?
We have a no, yes, and Philip mentions only fresh. Rosie mentions yes. Michael says yes too.
So this one is actually a no. So yeah, tuna unfortunately doesn't count towards your oily fish, but it's still very healthy and you can still have it. And sardines, what does everyone think? Again, a yes or a no?
We have five yeses so far. So overwhelmingly, yes.
Sounds good. Sounds like these are more well known. So yeah, everything like sardines and mackerel definitely count towards your oily fish. And lastly, this is meant to picture a cod or a haddock in your fish and chips. Do people think yes or no?
We have 5 no's already.
Yeah, they've got the hang of it now. So yeah, fortunately, this doesn't count towards your oily fish. So it is just fish like salmon or sardines, mackerel, herring, you know, anything like that. The types of fish that tend to be a bit more smelly and pungent, but they're still just as tasty.
And Becky, sorry to interrupt you. There is a question relevant to this. Would you like that to be shared towards the end of the session, or would you like to hear it now?
Yeah, if you could say it towards the end of the session, and then that'd be perfect.
No problem. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go on to dairy and alternatives now. So as you can see in the picture, it's getting a slightly smaller slice again of the pie, but this is things like cheeses and milks and yogurts. And what's also included in here is plant-based alternatives. If you're vegetarian or vegan or choose to have plant-based alternatives. And they're all good sources of protein and some vitamins. And they're also an important source of calcium, which helps to keep our bones strong. And the advice here is to try and go for lower fat and lower sugar products where possible. So that's things like 1% fat milk or semi-skimmed milk, as you see here, reduced fat cheese or plain low-fat yogurt. And if you have children that are under 5 years old, that's the only caveat where they can have full fat milk as they're still growing and developing. And for plant-based alternatives, what's important to mention if you're buying, let's say, plant-based alternative milks, it's important to check the label to see if they're fortified with vitamins and minerals, especially calcium, because this is so important because that means they will be more nutritionally equivalent to dairy foods or the milk, and you'll be less likely to be missing out on the key nutrients or vitamins and minerals that you would have been getting from dairy foods. Okay, and next you can see this little sliver is the oils and spreads section. So although the advice I've just given seeks to reduce fat intake, a small amount of fat is still an absolutely essential part of a healthy, balanced diet. Unsaturated fats are healthier fats, so they're cardioprotective or protect your heart. And these include things like vegetable oils, rapeseed oil, olive oil, and sunflower oils. But it's important to remember all types of fats are high in energy and should be eaten sparingly, as too much fat in your diet, especially saturated fats, can raise your cholesterol, which increases the risk of heart disease. So I wanted to look as well at what we could be doing to reduce our saturated fat intake. So we can do little things like removing the skin from meats, as that tends to be where the fatty layer is. You can choose leaner meats or eat more white meat, which tends to be lower in saturated fat. This is also where plant-based alternatives come in. So you can have things like soy mince or vegetarian sausages if you like them. It doesn't have to be like a blanket vegan ban. You can just have them now and then if you like them. And lastly, oils, just to remember to use them sparingly as well. And there's lots of good oil sprays you can buy as well, which really do help to regulate the amount of oil that we use if we're using a little bit too much. And next, we're going on to the section which is not actually included in the circle itself, and this is sugars and saturated fats. So sugars are not a totally essential part of our diet, but of course it features in our modern lifestyles as part of celebrations. So if you think about weddings or birthday cakes, it's always going to be there. And also these foods are sometimes just for enjoyment and indulgence. So within our culture, they definitely do have a place. And so an important message to share here is that we should never completely restrict these if we want to, but we should just try to reduce the amount that we eat and try to eat them in small amounts. So it's never about restriction and eliminating these things from our diet altogether. It's just about enjoying them in small amounts and less often as well. And for me, I often find that it's quite easy to snack on sweet treats or sweet foods or foods that are high in saturated fat and sugar, things like crisps or biscuits or chocolate. And so I just wanted to provide a few examples of healthier go-to snacks. And these are just my ideas, but you can you might not like these or like these, or you could create your own. So the first one is to have apple and peanut butter. Second one is to have carrots and hummus. Hummus is made from chickpeas, so really good for upping your protein and fiber intake as well. And lastly, things like rice cakes or low-fat soft cheese spread. These are just a few ideas, but obviously you can be creative with your own healthy snack ideas as well. And next, this is onto the top right corner of the Eat Well guide, which is all about hydration. So we should all aim to be drinking about 6 to 8 cups or glasses of fluid a day. And water is obviously a healthy and cheap choice to quench your thirst at any time. It's got no calories and contains no sugars that can damage your teeth. And also to hydrate, you can have plain tea, preferably without sugar. Herbal teas and coffees can also be healthy. And if, like some people in my family, you don't like the taste of plain water, or you can be fussy about your water and how it tastes regionally, you can always add you can try sparkling water, or you can try to add things like lemon or lime or sugar-free squash as well. And fruit juice and smoothies also count towards your fluid intake. But like I mentioned before, it's recommended to limit these to 150 milliliters per day, as they can be quite high in sugar as well. And next, I'm going to be talking about food labeling. So if you're unsure of the nutrition in a food product you might buy, I would definitely recommend to check the label. And in the UK, a colour-coded system like this is quite popular. It's not on every single food, but it's on a lot of foods. And this is either called colour-coded or traffic light labelling. And this allows you to see at a glance I can give you a really good idea of the energy, the fats, saturates, and sugars and salts in a portion of the food. So essentially red means high, amber means medium, and green means low. And honestly, I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to labeling, so I could spend all day talking about it. But in short, the more green on the label, the healthier the choice or the food. And if you buy food that has, all green on the label, straight away that's probably going to be a healthy choice. Amber means neither high nor low, and any red on the label means that the food is high in salt or fats or saturated fats, so anything that's got red highlighted. And these are the foods that we should try to cut down or eat less of or in small amounts. And lastly, as part of the guide, I just wanted to talk about vitamin supplements. So this is not technically part of the guide, but I think it's really important to talk about as well. So the NHS advice states that most people that are generally healthy and have a varied, balanced diet do not need to take vitamin supplements, and that's with the exception of vitamin D. So vitamin D helps to regulate the amount of calcium and phosphate in the body. So vitamin D and calcium are really linked, which is really important for our bones and teeth and muscles, and especially in the aging process. And we can get vitamin D from some foods, like oily fish, like the fish we just talked about. But the best source of vitamin D is from sunlight, from being outside. So we naturally absorb it when our skin is exposed to the sun. And that's why you might sometimes hear vitamin D referred to as the sunshine vitamin as well. So from around late March or early April until the end of September, so when it's much more sunny, most people can get all the vitamin D that they need through the sunlight on their skin and from eating a very balanced diet. But during the autumn and winter, you need to get enough vitamin D from your diet because the sun is not strong enough for your body to make vitamin D throughout those months. And because it can be quite difficult to get that through your diet from food alone, and this is including pregnant and breastfeeding women, everyone should really consider taking a daily supplement of vitamin D, and that's 10 micrograms during those autumn and winter months. And some groups of the population are more at risk of having low levels of vitamin D or not getting enough vitamin D. And they are advised to take a supplement every day of the year. So these are people who may be staying inside more often, or they might usually wear clothes that cover up a lot of their body. Or they might have dark skin, as people with darker skin tend to require more sunlight exposure than light-skinned people to generate the same amount of vitamin D. And also just to say, obviously, well, a lot of us might have been inside a lot more this past year and a half. So again, if we're not getting out as much, it's super important to take vitamin D supplements if you need to. So hopefully I've got my message across. If you don't already, please do consider taking your vitamin D supplement in the least in the autumn and winter months. And when it comes to other vitamin supplements, if you generally have a healthy, balanced diet, you shouldn't really need to take any vitamin supplements. You can get everything you need from your diet. There may be exceptions if you're vegan or vegetarian or pregnant. But generally speaking, vitamin D is where you should be looking for supplements regularly. So I've got a little game, I guess, to put this into practice, what we've just been speaking about. So this is the Eat Well guide, which we've just talked through. And so I'm going to flash up the food here. So we have some tinned tuna. Is anyone able to put in the comments where you think that would fit, either the colour or the section, where you think the tinned tuna would fit within the guide?
We have, this is Ellie, we have pink, 3 pink, 4, 5, 6, we have 1 protein.
Yeah, we've got it. Okay, great. And the next one, we're looking at milk. This is in the picture, it's pretty much given away. So this one goes into the blue section, which is the dairy and dairy alternatives. Next, we have a jacket potato.
We have yellow, starch.
Well done. Yeah, so this would go into the yellow section, the starchy carbohydrates. And lastly, this is an obvious one, we have tinned tomatoes, which would go into the vegetable section. And then lastly, just an example of a juice drink as well, which would fit into your 6 to 8 fluid intake glasses a day. And then lastly, I just wanted to do a combined meal as well, so we can pick it apart and see exactly where it fits. So in terms of, this is a spaghetti bolognese. We've got the parmesan on top as well. So just to pick this apart, so the vegetables, we've got the tinned tomato, which was put with the mint. For the carbohydrate, of course, we've got the pasta, which we made whole wheat if we want to up the fibre intake as well. For the little purple slither, which was the oils and spreads, let's say that we put a little bit of oil in with the pasta as well. For the dairy and alternatives, the Parmesan cheese would fit into that section. And then lastly, for the pink, so let's say we use lean mint in this spaghetti bolognese. So just wanted to provide that as an example of where we can, pick apart a meal. It's not all going to be set out in, thirds and sections like we just talked through. But this is a really good basis to use for any meal that you have. And it's a good idea to have all elements where you can in the meals that you have over a week or a month or more. Okay, so next I wanted to go on to tips to help your food budget stretch. So obviously the last year and a half has been really tough for a lot of people financially, and especially with regards to food accessibility and affordability, and making sure that it's healthy and nutritious on top of that. So I wanted to take some time now to share some top tips on how you can make your food budget stretch further without compromising on nutrition. And then, if possible, feel free to write in the comments as well to also share your top tips on this as well. So some key tips from me are to firstly just try and make a shopping list and try to stick to it. Now, that's easier said than done, but if you are able to shop online, I think this might be much easier to do online. But if you can, make a shopping list before you do your regular shop. And that way you might be less likely to stray or to buy something new that takes your fancy that realistically you don't need. And making a list should only take a few minutes, and you can put on exactly what you need, how much of everything you need, and you can even predict how much you think it will cost to try and stick within your budget. And secondly, to use your freezer. So I think over the past year and a half, or however long this pandemic has been, this has just been one of my favorite inventions. I've used it so much more than I ever did. And that's just because they can just extend the shelf life of your foods by so long without taking away any of the nutrition value. So, for example, we already talked about you could buy frozen fruit or frozen veg, which are just as nutritious as fresh versions. Or you can freeze things like bread, which I do a lot, and also even things like cheese if you're going to use them in dishes as well. You're going to use them for cooking. Meat and meat alternatives and leftover foods as well are really great to freeze. And then also, this is a top tip and also very sustainable as well, I guess, is to use scraps in soups and smoothies and sauces. So these are the vegetable peels if they're edible. So one of my favorite things to do, for example, with fruit that's getting a bit old, is to, or you've not gotten around to eating it, is to make a smoothie where you can just blend it all together, so you can never you can't see the mushiness that was there. Or if your veg is on its last legs, you can put them in soup and then blend it together, or you can use them in a sauce. And that means it's also, if you use peel, it's a really good way of getting extra fiber into your diet as well. And the next tip is to try to know what you already have in your kitchen. So, you know, there may be times over the years, I know there has been with me, where you find an old potato in the back of the cupboard and you think, oh, how long's that been there? So that could have been really put to use. So it's definitely worth keeping track of what you have in your kitchen, so you're not buying duplicates necessarily. And so I'll go on to the next one. So the next one is, if you can, it's a good idea to make more portions than you need for a meal. For example, if we take our spaghetti bolognese from earlier, you could always make more of the sauce or the meat mixture than you need, and then freeze a few portions. And that just means the next time you don't have any time, or you don't really feel like cooking, or you just need something quite quickly, you can use that either leftovers the next day, or you could freeze it and use it at a later date. And lastly, for more food that lasts longer, is canned or tinned foods, which, as we've spoken about, could be anything from tuna to corned beef to baked beans, as they tend to be cheaper in price, and they're a really good kitchen stock filler that you don't have to use straight away and you can use within your own time. So I just wanted to pause for a question here as well, as I'd really like to know afterwards, what are your top tips to help stretch your food budget stretch? Please do add these to the comments, and maybe we can take a look at them afterwards as well. Okay. So now we'll be going on to nutrition needs throughout life, and moving away from the Eat Well guide. We're talking about how nutrition needs might change throughout life, and how, if somebody is ill, we can adapt the nutrition guidance that we've just spoken about, which can be applied to the majority of the population, but just see how it might have to be adapted both to yourself or the person that you're caring for if they're unwell or recovering from illness. And also, as we age, our nutrition needs change, and we may not be able to use the nutrients that we get from food as efficiently as we do normally or used to. And our body may not be able to use the nutrients from the foods that we eat as well, which can result in things like weight loss, loss of muscle tone, loss of appetite, or a weakened immune system as well. So we're just going to explore now the role of energy in illness. So energy has a really important role to play in managing and recovering from illness. And when you're ill or recovering, you may feel less hungry and eat less, but the body actually needs more energy to recoup and to be able to recover. So if you or the people or person you are caring for are struggling eating in large amounts, or they can only stomach maybe the plainer tasting foods, what you can try to do is add energy in where you can. So I've just got a few examples here and things you can do to boost energy through nutrition in small amounts. So firstly, we have adding ground almonds to honey or porridge, so a bit of a plainer food, and trying to increase the energy there. Serving vegetable with a cheese sauce, again, possibly more to try more of a neutral flavour with fruit and veg to make sure they're still getting their intake there. And lastly, to stir butter through mashed potatoes or maybe cream or something like that. So in general, the boosters tend to be adding things like nuts or cheese or butter or cream where you can, not in massive amounts, but just enough for that little bit of energy boost, which may help them recover and manage their illness. And just to say as well here, these are all just examples, but even if, you know, all somebody can stomach is a really plain food, a little bit of mashed potato, a little biscuit or something like that, anything just to get that bit of energy is better than having absolutely nothing. And next we'll go on to the role of protein in illness. So protein also plays a really important role if someone is suffering or recovering from an illness. And when you are ill or recovering, the body will need more proteins. This means ideally we'd like to eat more high protein foods. So these include everything we saw in the slice earlier. So you have things like nuts, fish, beans, lentils, and the lean meats there. And also things like dairy, like yogurt and cheese, which might be a little bit plainer and maybe a bit more easy to stomach, definitely help to give any protein as well for recovery. And I just want to spend a bit of time now looking at what actually causes reduced food intake. So it could be a variety of reasons. We've got some 3 key reasons here. So firstly, for physical reasons, this could include a loss of appetite, tiredness and fatigue, chewing or swallowing difficulties, a reduced sense of taste or smell, or chronic pain. Secondly, emotional or social reasons, which could include things like appetite loss, refusal to eat, feeling lonely, anxious or depressed, or concerns about buying the right food on a tight budget. And lastly, eating less can lead to a nutritional gap between a person's nutrition needs and their actual food intake. So this can then lead to things like weight loss, as we've talked before in the last slide, so decrease in strength, reduced movements, or just a reduced ability to care for themselves. So we're going to be moving on now about how you can identify and manage nutrition when food intake is not enough. So there are certain signs that show when food intake is not enough. And these could include things like weight loss unexpectedly, clothes and jewelry becoming loose, muscle weakness, changes in hair, so it becomes stiff or wiry, or there could be hair loss. And also there could be changes in their skin. So it could be dull or yellow or with a grey complexion. And it's really important to note that if you notice any of these signs in the person that you're caring for, you can take a simple screening test to check if they're at risk of malnutrition or at risk of developing a nutrition gap. And I've linked to a self-screening tool for malnutrition here, and I'll also send that to Ellie and Michael so they can send that out to you afterwards as well. So what you can do, what can we do in these circumstances? So there are things that we can do to encourage food intake if you think that it's not enough. So things like just encouraging getting fresh air outside, or if possible, doing some really gentle exercise to stimulate appetite. And when I say exercise, I don't mean a full-on routine in the garden. I just mean, really simple movements, even in your chair, just to get the body moving a little bit. Eating little and often, so it might be a good idea to spread meals out over a day rather than just 3 meals a day if that's possible. So also trying to have 2 to 3 snacks a day spread throughout, and that might help to avoid somebody feeling overwhelmed at meal times or the amount of food that they would have to eat. Also drinking enough fluid to keep hydrated, this definitely still stands, but everything in balance as too much can actually lead to feeling bloated or filling up. So hydration is really important, but not too much. And then, like we said before, adding extra energy where you can to foods can really, really help. And then if you would like to as well, consuming nourishing drinks or milk-based nutrition supplements, if you would like to, can also help. And again, here, I just wanted to pause just to see how these tips resonated with you. And we really encourage you to write in the chat if you have any tips of your own and would like to share them with everyone here as well. And maybe we could come back to them as well. And for this section, I just wanted to finish ending on when you should seek help. So when things become out of our control. So eating enough of the right foods can also be difficult when living with an illness or a long-term condition. So the Eat Well guide we spoke about earlier may not always apply for everyone if they have different conditions or medical needs that can be quite complex. So if you would like to, you should seek help from a GP if you're worried about the diet of the person you care for, or you notice signs of reduced food intake or unintended weight loss. And you could even ask for a referral to a dietitian, which might be able to help there as well. So the last section we will talk through is about taking care of yourself. So nutrition is not the only thing that contributes to your overall health. And the tips I'm going to talk about today hopefully would act as a reminder, as these are often interlinked with nutrition and our appetites in general. So firstly, sleep. So most adults need between 6 and 9 hours of sleep every night. So that is what's recommended. And if you have difficulty falling asleep, a regular bedtime routine should really help you to wind down and prepare for bed. And there is no set magic routine. Your routine depends on entirely what works for you. But the most important thing is working out a routine and then trying to stick to it, as this then programs the brain and the internal body clock and sets us up for that routine every day. And winding down is also a really critical stage in preparing for sleep. So you should try, if possible, to relax as much as you can. And this is easier said than done, but try to keep electronics or gadgets or your phone outside of the bedroom if you can before bed. I know a lot of gadgets now have, you know, a night mode or a sleep mode. So you could try that as well if you do have electronics in your room. And secondly, movement. So adults should try to do some type of physical activity every day, and any type of activity is good for you. And essentially, the more you do, the better. The actual guidelines state that for adults aged 19 to 64, should do at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity a week, or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity activity a week. And also to try and reduce time spent sitting or lying down, and break up long periods of not moving with some activity. But what's important to say here is, you know, obviously not everyone is able to jump around and do really vigorous high intensity activities. So just to say, any type of movement is really good for you. So again, it could be just as simple as taking a walk around the corner or just in your garden, or any type of movement, even if it's just, you know, stretches in your chair, anything like that is much better than doing nothing. Walking where possible, if you can, to take stairs instead of escalators. And for anyone that's not comfortable, you know, going outside or into a gym environment, it's really good to consider just a video workout class if you have the space as well. And I've heard you had some really good Zumba classes for Kerry's UK as well, so that sounds great. And lastly, just to talk about relaxation. So how we relax is different for everybody. So it could be a cup of tea and a chat with a friend. It could be walking the dog. It could be taking a bath, reading a book, even meditation if you like meditating. So whatever helps you to de-stress, try where you can to fit it into your routine. I feel like this is something we all know, but just need to be reminded of somewhere to look after ourselves and promote our self-care. Okay, so again, I just had a question here. Please feel free to add in the chat what you do for yourself to take care of yourself, and share some tips there if you'd like to. Okay, so that's going to be the end of this presentation. So I just wanted to reiterate the take-home messages for today. So firstly, the NHS Eat Well Guide is a really useful guide for you to plan your meals around a healthy, balanced diet. And we went through all the different sections about what that means and how you can boost your fibre and boost your protein and food intake. Secondly, vitamin D supplementation is really important, especially in autumn and winter months. Making your food budget stretch doesn't have to mean missing out on nutrition. There's lots you can do, lots of top tips for, you know, affordable shops that are also nutritious. Next, energy and protein are really important for recovery from illnesses, and there are steps you can take to encourage food intake. And then lastly, taking care of yourself is key. So please do remember that.